Some artists are remembered for their songs, others for the eras they defined. But there are rare figures whose lives become inseparable from the meaning of endurance itself. This is the story of one such voice, a woman who rose from quiet hardship in rural Quebec to global recognition, only to discover that the greatest challenges of her life would not come from stage, but from fate, loss, and a body that would eventually turn against her. Her journey is not simply one of fame, but of survival across every dimension a human life can hold: poverty, ambition, love, grief, and illness. Long before stadiums filled with millions of fans, she was a child in a crowded home where music was not a luxury but a necessity. Long before awards and standing ovations, she was learning that talent alone is never enough to protect a person from life's unpredictability. And long after the world believed her story had reached its peak, she was forced into a quieter battle. One fought in silence, away from applause, where strength is measured not in notes sung, but in steps taken, breaths controlled, and days endured. This is not just a story about a singer. It is a story about what remains when everything else is stripped away. Origins in a house built on survival, she was born into a family where survival was a daily calculation. In a small Quebec town, one of 14 children, she entered a household already stretched beyond comfort or stability. Resources were scarce, but the home was rich in something else entirely: music. Her parents filled their space with song, not as performance, but as expression. It was how the family communicated joy, frustration, and resilience when words fell short. In that environment, hardship was not abstract. It was lived. Meals were stretched to feed everyone, privacy did not exist, and winter brought challenges that tested even the strongest resolve. Yet within this fragile structure, something remarkable was quietly forming. Music became the center of emotional life, and for the youngest child, it became instinct. She learned early that attention was not given freely, it had to be earned. At 5 years old, she sang on a kitchen table for her family, not out of performance anxiety, but certainty. That moment would later be remembered as a turning point, not because it was planned, but because it revealed something undeniable. Her voice carried a presence that filled the room beyond its size. Her family may not have understood what that meant for the future, but they understood enough to recognize it was different. In a home defined by scarcity, something abundant had appeared. A discovery that changed everything. The first turning point did not come from ambition, but from observation. Her mother, noticing her daughter's unusual vocal ability, composed a song and recorded a simple demo. It was sent to a respected music manager in Quebec, a man accustomed to receiving countless recordings from hopeful performers. At first, the tape seemed ordinary, but something in the voice compelled him to listen again, and then again. There was clarity, emotional depth, and technical precision that seemed impossible for someone so young. Curiosity turned into urgency, and soon he arranged to meet the family. He expected preparation, professionalism, perhaps even stage polish. Instead, he found a child in a modest living room, untrained in presentation, but instinctively commanding when she sang. The contrast was striking, the simplicity of her surroundings against the power of her voice. That moment altered the trajectory of multiple lives. The manager made an unconventional decision, choosing to invest deeply in her future. It was not a cautious industry move. It was a personal commitment that involved financial risk and belief that bordered on certainty. What he had recognized was not just potential, it was inevitability. Something in her voice suggested not a possibility of success, but a force already in motion. Transformation and the cost of becoming global success in her home region came quickly, but staying there was never the plan. The transition from local recognition to global presence required reinvention, not of her talent, but of her image, language, and presentation. She underwent intensive preparation, vocal refinement, language training, and stylistic transformation. Every detail was shaped with the intention of bridging the gap between who she was and who the world needed her to be. It was not erasure, it was construction. The process was demanding, but she approached it with discipline. She understood that talent alone does not cross borders. Strategy, adaptation, and endurance were required. Behind the scenes, her life became structured around preparation, every hour accounted for, every decision tied to long-term purpose. As she moved into international markets, her voice became instantly recognizable. It carried emotional clarity that transcended language. Audiences responded not just to technique, but to feeling. Yet beneath the growing success was an awareness that fame always comes with trade-offs. The more visible she became, the less private her life remained. The foundation of her identity was expanding, but also becoming exposed to scrutiny she could not control. Love, controversy, and public judgment as her career expanded. So did public interest in her personal life. Her professional relationship with her longtime manager eventually evolved into something deeper. The age difference between them became a focal point of media attention, transforming a private bond into a public debate. The scrutiny was intense. Questions about power, influence, and choice surrounded their relationship. Headlines often reduced complexity into simplicity, stripping away emotional nuance in favor of controversy. She did not retreat from the criticism. Instead, she spoke with clarity about her own understanding of the relationship. For her, it was not a product of circumstance, but of genuine connection formed over years of trust and shared experience. Still, the public response was divided. Admiration for her artistry coexisted with judgment of her personal decisions. She learned early that visibility comes with interpretation, and interpretation often ignores lived reality. Through it all, she remained focused on her work. Her voice continued to define her public identity, even as her private life became a subject of constant examination. Loss that redefined everything at the height of her success. She experienced losses that reshaped her entirely. The death of her husband and mentor, followed closely by the loss of a sibling, created a period of emotional devastation that no career achievement could shield her from. Grief arrived not as a single event, but as a sequence of absences. The structure that had supported her life both personally and professionally was suddenly gone. Yet even in this moment, she did not withdraw from responsibility entirely. She returned to the stage sooner than many expected, not as a performance of resilience, but as continuation. Singing became a way of existing through pain rather than escaping it. Her return was not framed as triumph. It was quiet, deliberate, and deeply human. The audience response reflected something beyond admiration. It was recognition of vulnerability carried in public view. She had always used music as expression. Now it became something closer to survival. The body begins to change for decades. Her physical discipline had been as intense as her artistic one. Vocal control required precision, rest, and careful maintenance. She treated her body like an instrument, one that needed protection to remain functional at the highest level. But gradually, something unfamiliar began to occur. Small changes in movement, unexpected stiffness, and unexplained physical limitations started appearing. At first, they were subtle enough to be dismissed as fatigue or stress. Over time, however, they became harder to ignore. The body that had supported decades of performance was beginning to resist control. What made this period particularly difficult was uncertainty. Without a diagnosis, there was no framework for understanding what was happening. She continued working, adapting, and compensating, as performers often do when their instrument begins to change. But the reality was more complex than exhaustion. Something deeper was unfolding beneath the surface. A rare diagnosis and an unfamiliar battle eventually, the condition was identified, a rare neurological disorder that affects the body's ability to regulate movement and muscle response. The diagnosis explained years of symptoms that had previously lacked clarity. The condition was not widely understood, even within medical communities. Its rarity meant that treatment options were limited and prognosis uncertain. For someone whose career depended entirely on physical precision, the implications were profound. Everyday movements became unpredictable. Performance, once instinctive, now required careful consideration of physical capacity. She stepped away from public performance to focus on treatment and adaptation. The absence of her voice from the stage was noticeable not only to fans, but to the broader cultural landscape. In private, life became centered around rehabilitation, medical support, and recalibration of expectations. The focus shifted from performance to preservation, silence, recovery, and redefinition. The period that followed was defined by absence. The stage that had once been central to her identity was replaced by clinical spaces and recovery routines. Yet silence did not mean disappearance. It became a different form of work, one that required patience, discipline, and acceptance of limitation. She began rebuilding basic physical abilities, learning to navigate movement in ways that were no longer automatic. Each step required awareness. Each day required adjustment. In this phase, identity was no longer tied to performance. It was tied to endurance. Her family became central to this process, providing continuity in a life that had shifted dramatically. Outside the public eye, recovery became its own kind of performance, one without audience, but with profound stakes. Returned to the world stage years later, she returned to a global stage in a moment that carried symbolic weight. Performing at a major international event, she appeared visibly changed, yet unmistakably present. The performance was not about technical perfection. It was about presence under constraint. Every movement reflected awareness of physical limitation, yet every note carried emotional depth, shaped by lived experience. The audience response was immediate and intense. What they witnessed was not just a performance, but a life condensed into a single moment of expression. The significance of the return was not in proving recovery, but in demonstrating continuity. Despite everything, the voice remained. And within that voice was everything she had lived through. Living forward without finality today, her life continues under conditions shaped by ongoing medical management and adaptation. The illness has not disappeared, but it has been met with structure, discipline, and resilience. She no longer defines her life solely through performance. Instead, she focuses on presence, family, recovery, and the possibility of future expression when possible. Her story resists closure. It does not follow a simple arc of rise, fall, and resolution. Instead, it reflects something more realistic, a life still unfolding under changing conditions. What remains consistent is not fame, but voice, not perfection, but persistence. Outro. What endures beyond the stage, the story of her life is not defined by a single achievement or a single struggle. It is defined by accumulation of hardship, recognition, loss, and endurance. From a crowded home in Quebec to the largest stages in the world, and then into the quiet uncertainty of illness, her journey reflects the unpredictability of human experience. What makes her story resonate is not perfection, but continuity in the face of disruption. Fame did not protect her from grief. Success did not prevent loss. Talent did not shield her from illness. Yet through each stage of life, something remained intact: the ability to transform experience into expression. Her voice has never been only about sound. It has always been about connection between artist and audience, between suffering and understanding, between fragility and strength. And perhaps that is why her story continues to matter, not because it is complete, but because it is still unfolding.